first part of it is fellowship, the part of just having a meal together and getting to know one another. The second part of it is a quick presentation of a resource that we have available to you, to the Churches of Marion Baptist Association. And today it's all about healthy churches, and I'll be talking about how we can help you and help your church to become healthier. And the whole point of today is just simply to kind of open up the concept. It's about a 30-minute presentation. The goal is to get you out of here by 12:45 if you got things you need to get back to. But to follow up with this presentation is I'm available to come to your church to spend an extended period of time with you and anybody on your team and to unpack this and share more information. We could do a half day, we could do a full day, we could do an entire church health campaign that lasts for about a year. So if you want to know more after you hear today, just let me know. I'm here for you. I'll be glad to come and meet with you one-on-one. David, if you're ready, come on up and tell us a little bit about Stewardship Simplified.
Try to get the Wi-Fi.
Okay, we'll get that set up, and then he provided those nice insulated cups for you and the information on the table as well.
All right, let me see if I can just pull it up.
You get a Mac?
Yes.
You just plug it in.
This got the HDMI.
That should take this for two.
Let's see if I get the screen share or something.
Oh, I think it's not mirroring your screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. One second.
Listening to a sermon.
Okay. All right. That was easier than I thought, actually. All right. All right. Excuse me. All right. I'm David Russo, Florida Baptist Financial Services. Anybody know who we are already? I don't know. We're now going by the logo Stewardship Simplified. You see those on the mugs that I handed out in your paperwork. I just started at the beginning of the year with this group. It's a new role for the organization. We're based out of Jacksonville. We were started by the... I need a little glass. I'm sorry. Yeah. The strips got stuck in my throat. Hopefully we can get through this. Based out of Jacksonville, we started around 1949 as a commission of the Florida Baptist Convention, and we are not. We are supportive and allied with the convention, but we are not a part. We are not a corporation of the convention. Okay, so we are fairly independent, but we are very connected in the things that we do. And so we are out of Jacksonville, which is where the convention's office is as well. So we offer services to churches. We are a partner. We're here to support, to help churches grow and build and manage and to leave and create legacy. And so this is a chart I'll go through in just a second. It kind of highlights that. I've given you two pieces of information on the table, and we'll walk through that in a second. And that explains the two main divisions of who we are. Okay, so if you look at the chart here, you'll see the church. A lot of people know us as the Florida Baptist Foundation. And so we have a foundation side, that's one division of Florida Baptist Financial Services, or now Stewardship Simplified. And that foundation, we can do all kinds of estate planning services. We can do legacy planning. We can do charitable giving. We can create donor-advised funds, charitable annuities, handle trusts. Yep. Oh, time out on you. Okay. Come on back. All right, maybe just have to touch that every time. So anything you think of related to estate planning, related to charitable giving, we manage endowments and we manage foundations for churches. I go to First Baptist Orlando. I'm based out of Orlando, by the way. I'm married 29 years, have 4 children, 2 older that are out of the house. In fact, I am now a grandpa. We just had our first baby, our grandbaby in the house. So my oldest is 28. They just had their first child. And then my middle son is not married yet. He's a tennis coach in Orlando. And then I've got 2 at home, a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old boy, going to the First Academy in Orlando. They keep me busy and young, the 2 younger ones. And my wife is a counselor. She runs the counseling center at First Orlando and does a lot of training related to counseling services and protocols related to trauma and things like that. So that's who I am. But as this new role, I cover all of Central Florida, east to west, and this is who we are. And the reason I'm out here is because if y'all don't know who we are, there's a problem because we've been around for a long time, and we want to be the feet on the street to say, here is who we are and what we do, and so you have some understanding of that. So if you look at this, we do a number of things. We start with estate planning. So we have the foundation side, and we have, in the whole organization, we have about $300 million between the foundation as well as the Church Growth Investment Fund side of it. And I think in the foundation we're up to about $150 million of the total assets. And so, we can come in. One of the benefits to the churches that we do with that is we can do a legacy planning workshop or a state kind of set your financial house in order. For you as a pastor, I won't ask you to raise your hand, but if you don't have a will set up, a will package, not just the will, but also all the other documents that go with that, your power of attorney and healthcare surrogate and all those things, we can give you one for free. So we have a link that I can send you, and you can sign up and get that done for free. Okay. We don't have attorneys in-house, but we have a service that we offer for that. Okay. So please do that if you don't have a will. Make note of that because there's no cost. Typical will package will cost you anywhere from $400 to $2,500, depending on the attorney, okay, and how complicated it is if you have trust and other things. So that's the foundation side. And so the real thing that we do a lot with churches is helping your church think about legacy. Think about, one, individually having your financial house in order, but also how can we create legacy for the church or your organization, okay? The other side, if you pull out the folder piece, not the green one, but the folder, is the Church Growth Investment Fund, okay? And you see the cycle, the arrows going in a circle. What it's all about is really churches supporting churches and individuals supporting church growth within the church. All right, so we're not a bank, we're not a financial institution as much as we are. We're kind of as my boss Rick Wheeler likes to say, we were there doing crowdsourcing before crowdsourcing was popular when it comes to fundraising, and so this is a simple way for people to be able to invest. So you as a church can invest. If you have money sitting in the bank in a cash management account earning 0. nothing interest at that bank, which is a commercial bank that wants to make money and use that money for other things, you could invest here for that cash management and then start it in a liquid account at 1.35%. So there's a little envelope in there. If you pull that out, you can see the different rates that's in the slide. And so 1 year demand account, 1.35% is better than your 0.015 or whatever by more than 10 times. All right, so it's just good stewardship to earn what you can with that. And then it goes up to about 3%. Think about it like a CD type thing. So if you get in a 2-year certificate or 3-year or 5-year or 7-year, you can go up to about 3% on the high end or something in between. So think about it as cash management for your church. If you're sitting in a bank and you don't need that money in the next couple of months, this really is. It's better rates than what you're going to get in a money market or some other savings account. Okay, and it's not just for you. If you have individuals, let's say you're doing a capital campaign or you're trying to get people to want to give individuals can give to this to help support whatever the growth of the church is as well. Okay. What we do with the money that's invested, we can then loan it out to churches that are for only one of three things. They can do new construction, they can renovate, or they can buy property. We're not there doing anything else with that money other than to help churches grow and build. And that's it. Okay? All right. So, and then finally, we do offer some other things. In addition to that, we have accounting services. So if you need some help with accounting, this is a new thing it's called Church Simplified, and or Simplified Church, and so we can do some accounting for you guys. And then one other thing that we're going to do, I haven't done one in this area, but I'll talk to Mark and see if you have some interest. We do some pastor cohorts where we come in and bring you all together in a room, and we talk about how do you create a culture of generosity in your church. My counterpart in South Florida, out of Miami, he comes from Generis, which is a church consulting group, so you may be familiar with, and we can help understand how do you create proper communication, conversations, and networking within a church, not just from the pulpit, but how do you get the whole vision established through the discipleship process. And it's a three meetings over 3 months is all that we do, and we'll set one of those up here for you as well. So that's a short version of who we are. All right.
And feel free to call on David if you need some more information about what they do. You guys were out at College Road for a few weeks ago for a seminar there. Was that you, or was that your counterpart?
That may have been David.
Okay.
He was with he's been with a couple of groups, but he gets around on some of his consulting work.
Okay. Well, they had it was the Will Planning Seminar. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, the Wills.
Anyway, they had about
3 Wills.
170 some odd people out for that event. Obviously, that's a hot topic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, David. Appreciate you.
Resource.
We're going to segue into characteristics of healthy churches. I'm going to give you a quick overview of some research results about healthy churches. And this comes from Christian Swartz's book called Natural Church Development. And you can always go online, buy a copy of the book, get more information. There's another resource put out by Bob Logan and Tom Clegg. It's called Releasing Your Church's Potential. It's an entire notebook on how to plan around this. But up here at the table, I also have some information from Mark Deaver on 9 marks of a healthy church, and also from Lifeway Research on theirs is also 9 characteristics of spiritually healthy churches. But what I want to share with you today is a different approach to church health and growth. What we've seen over the years, if a church is doing a really great job and they see amazing growth, then everybody around the country wants to come to that church, and let's call it Church A. And everybody wants to come around and see what that church has done, why they have had this incredible growth, and then they go back and try to implement that into their church. So that's a one-on-one imitation approach, seeing what Church A is doing and coming here and trying to make it fit in Church B. The problem with that approach is some things only work in one area because it's contextualized to that area. A cowboy church probably, wouldn't do really well in, New York City. Maybe it will. They got the naked cowboy up there. Maybe it would. But there are some things that are contextual. They only fit in that particular cultural context or that particular location. A better approach is a principle approach. And in the principle approach, we're looking at multiple churches in multiple contexts, cultural context, geographic context, and abstracting from those churches the principles that we can apply to other churches. And that's the result of this research that Christian Swartz has been doing for the past 30 years that he calls natural church development. So it's abstracting those principles and then individualizing them for the local church. I just really quickly want to share with you the results of his research. The initial research was done, I believe it was in 1996. They surveyed 1,000 churches in 12 countries on 5 continents, and they wanted to find out what do healthy churches have in common. They continued that research for another 20 years, so that by 2016, they had surveyed 70,000 churches in 100 countries, speaking 25 languages, including over 20,000 churches in the United States. And they're looking for two things. They're looking for biblical characteristics, number one. So every one of these characteristics that we're about to look at is a biblical characteristic. If they ran across something that was not biblical, they would kind of toss it aside. The other thing is it had to be verifiable. Sometimes people will say our church grows because of our prayer ministry. Well, that's great, and so everybody goes out and gets a copy of the prayer of Jabez, or they go to Brooklyn Tab and to see what their prayer ministry is like, and they try to imitate what they're doing. But if a church says, our church is growing, we're having incredible growth because our pastor wears blue suede shoes. And they're convinced that because their pastor wears blue suede shoes, that their church is growing. Well, that's not a biblical principle, nor is it verifiable. We can't go out and replicate that somewhere else and say, if this pastor's wearing blue suede shoes, is this church automatically going to see some kind of growth? So these principles that Christian Schwartz abstracted from his research basically quantified his hypothesis, and it was that healthy churches are growing churches. So hopefully we can focus on just simply what it means to be a healthy church and figure out how to grow our church out of health instead of focusing on church growth, because we've all seen situations where, you can say, well, they got a growing church there, but I don't necessarily think it's healthy. What they're doing is not healthy. It's not biblically healthy. It's not sustainable. It's not sound. They're just drawing a crowd. So what Schwartz also discovered is that quality can be measured. So we're looking at quality characteristics that can be measured over a period of time, where you can compare your church at one stage of its life with another stage of its life and see how are we doing in these quality areas, such as loving relationships. You say, well, how can you measure loving relationships? Well, there are certain things that people do in churches if they are loving people like Jesus loves people. And you can look for those very quantitative things, and you can see, are they happening to an increasing degree or a declining degree? And when you combine loving relationships with the other 7 quality characteristics, then you have a better idea if the church is being healthy and if the growth is happening because of health. So those 8 quality characteristics are, here they are. Now that's nothing astounding about that. Every church has leadership. Every church does ministry. Every church has spirituality. Every church has structures. And here when we're talking about structures, we're not talking about the building. We're talking about the organizational structure, how your church is structured, your decision-making processes. Every church has worship services. Most churches have small groups. In your church, how many of you would say you have small groups in your church? A few. How many of you have Sunday school? Some of you. How many of you have deacons? How many of you have committees? All of those are examples of small groups. They're all examples. They're small groups of people that are working together. So it might be a Bible study small group. It might be a work team small group. It might be a ministry small group, but those are all small groups. Hopefully every church has evangelism and every church has some kind of relationships. But the quality, what makes these characteristics quality characteristics are the adjectives that Schwartz attached to them from his research. So it's not just leadership, it's empowering leadership. It's not just ministry, it's gift-oriented ministry. It's not just spirituality, it's passionate spirituality. It's not just structures, it's effective structures. It's not just worship services, it's inspiring worship services. It's not just small groups, it's holistic small groups. It's not just evangelism, it's need-oriented evangelism. And it's not just relationships, it's loving relationships. As we just kind of pause here and take a look at these, I just want to see, do you have any questions? Or are there any thoughts that come to your mind as you see these characteristics? Is there something that jumps out and say, okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, one thought is, in terms of evangelism, I look at, in terms of the health of the church, is what percentage of the congregation is actively sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And as I talked to you before, we need help.
Yeah.
We need help.
Yeah, that is a measure of church health, and that also goes to the one of passionate spirituality. And when you see something like passionate spirituality, don't think of something as charisma, okay? Don't think of it that way. When they do these surveys and they're looking at passionate spirituality, they're looking at things like tithing, They're looking at things like church attendance. They're looking at things like attitudes behind church attendance. Do the people in your church go to church because they feel obligated to go? Because somebody's going to call and check up on them if they don't go, and they don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation? Or do they go to church because they are drawn to be together with God's people and worshiping together with God's people? So you're looking at people's attitudes and actions. But really quickly, let me, we're not going to have time to spend a lot of time on all of these, but let me just go through them quickly. Empowering leadership, it's not the same as empowered leadership. We don't want to get those two confused. In a lot of churches, there's an emphasis upon the pastor being task-oriented and not people-oriented, upon the pastor being more autocratic. The pastor and the pastoral team, they get away, they make decisions on behalf of the church, and they implement those decisions, and it's everybody else's job to carry those out. That's not empowering leadership. Empowering leadership is when the leadership is giving away their leadership to other people. They're empowering other people to become leaders. It's like the difference between open source software and closed source software. Do y'all know the difference between the two?
No.
An open source software is something like WordPress. Okay, so WordPress is a website building software. The people who originally developed WordPress gave the source code away, the actual code for creating that software. Another one that I like is called Audacity. Audacity is a digital recording platform. If you had to buy something like Audacity, you'd be spending tens of thousands of dollars. But the people who developed that gave the source code away so that other developers could then come in and improve it and make it better. That's open source. An open source leader shares everything that he has, and he wants to see other people develop to at least his level of ability and perhaps beyond. So Jesus, was he an open source leader, or was he a proprietary leader? Proprietary is basically, I've got this knowledge, and you have to basically be certified in order to get it. And I'm not going to pass it on to you. I'm going to keep it. Knowledge is power. In order for me to maintain power, I have to keep all of the knowledge. So was Jesus more open source or proprietary? Open source. And not only was he open source, he gave us the same source that he had. He gave us the Holy Spirit.
Yes, sir.
He gave us access to his source of power and authority. He said in the Great Commission, Matthew 28, all authority has been granted to me. He gave that to his disciples. In Acts 1:8, he said, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. So he gives us his power and his authority. Also think of Ephesians 4:12 as Paul explains that the role of church leaders is to equip God's people for the work of service. The next one, gift-based ministry. This just simply means that as people are serving in the local church, they're serving according to their giftedness. They're using their spiritual gifts in ministry. I shared an example, I think it was with Jackie yesterday, about a church that I pastored, and there was a lady that wanted to start a children's church. And we were reaching a bunch of kids in apartment complexes and trailer parks, and we were doing good news clubs out in those trailer parks and apartments. And we were bringing them into our church on Sunday, and they were coming into the worship service, and they were quite rowdy. And so one of the ladies was very passionate about us starting a children's church. So I, in my young, naive way, I just kind of said, okay, then you're in charge of it. And she brought it up at a business meeting, and she made a motion, and we approved it. And I said on one condition that Delpha leads it. And so she was in charge of the children's ministry. Just one problem. The reason why she wanted us to have children's church was not because she loved kids, because she hated kids. She wanted those kids gone from the worship service. She wanted somebody to take them out of there, get them out of her hair. She didn't want to see them or hear them. And now she's in charge of ministering to those kids. Do you think the kids enjoyed children's church under her leadership? Not at all. Not at all. Not only was she not gifted as a teacher, she wasn't passionate about reaching children. So we want to make sure that people are leading according to their spiritual giftedness, according to their calling. I love the concept of shape, spiritual gifts, heart, ability, personality, experience. Passionate spirituality, I already touched on that just a little bit. Effective structures. Does the organizational structure of your church do what it's supposed to do? Another way to look at this is in your church, is the mission of your church It's the purpose of your church is to keep your church going according to a certain organizational structure. Does the mission support the structure, or does the structure support the mission? You see the difference? If the structure supports the mission, then you change your decision-making processes in order to be more effective at doing the mission of Christ. If the mission supports the structure, then you pass up mission opportunities because your current organizational structure won't allow you to do so. So that's not an effective structure if your mission is supporting the structure. Inspiring worship services, it does not refer to a certain style of worship. It doesn't refer to contemporary or to traditional or to liturgical or to charismatic. It just simply says, they're asking people, in your worship service, do you feel inspired by God? Are you getting information that you feel compelled to go put it into practice? There's several questions that are being asked. But what they found is that churches of all different worship styles scored both high and low on these surveys that they did. So even some churches that were very passionate about their spirituality could have been kind of more toned down in their worship style. Could have been slow and quiet and reflective. And even some of those where the people are jumping up and down and having a great time, they're doing a lot of stuff that's not necessarily biblical. So it's not related to style, but it's related to what is God doing in a person's life. Inspiring worship service, holistic small groups. Not only do you have small groups, are they holistic? Not only do they teach the Bible, are disciples being made in small groups? Not only are disciples learning more about who Jesus is, but they're applying what they're learning. Not only are small groups welcoming in new people, but are they multiplying? Are they starting new groups? Need-oriented evangelism. That means that the evangelist, the one sharing the gospel, is being considerate of the person they're sharing the gospel with, not just the message itself. So if you're sharing the gospel with somebody and you have a standard gospel presentation, and as you start the presentation, the person breaks down in tears, and you say, no, wait a minute, I still have 4 more points that I have to get through. Well, a compassionate person would stop and say, what's wrong? That is a need-oriented evangelism. Or the person can't hear you because their stomach is growling louder than your voice, and you're not concerned about them having any food. That would be the opposite of need-oriented evangelism. You don't change the message for the person, but you change the way you deliver the message. One of my favorite exercises to do is take the Gospel of John, read through the entire Gospel of John, and look at every evangelistic encounter that Jesus had. Every one of his evangelistic encounters was a need-oriented evangelistic encounter. Nicodemus, he needed to know some things about Jesus. The woman at the well, she needed to know that he valued her as a woman and as a Samaritan. The lame man that he healed, he needed to know that Jesus cared about his physical needs as well as his spiritual needs. So need-oriented evangelism. And then the last one is loving relationships. Yes, we have relationships within our church, but are they loving relationships? And as I mentioned earlier, we can actually measure the degree to which our relationships are loving. You can say, we have a loving church. But then if I were to say, well, when was the last time that you were in another church member's home for something other than an official church function? You go, huh? When's the last time that you had coffee or a meal with another church member? When was the last time that you felt compelled to meet another church member's needs without being prompted to do so by a leader in the church? So those kinds of things make up loving relationships. The kind of the basis for this growth, as Schwartz calls it, natural church development. We're going to skip over here real quick. Is what he calls the biotic principles. Now, if you look at this parable here in Matthew chapter 4, 26 through 29, it's about the man who scatters the seed. And so it says the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground. Oops, let me back up. Slide advanced by itself. All right, so the man scattered seed on the ground, and it's moving by itself. So you know the parable. He scatters seed on the ground. He goes to sleep. He doesn't have to know how the seed germinates, why the stalk grows, how it produces fruit. He doesn't have to know any of that. It just happens all by itself. And in that passage, it says all by itself. And the Greek word there that is translated all by itself is the word that from which we get our word automate. It's automatically. So the point here is that church growth is an automatic result of church health. That when we focus on church health, that growth is something that happens as a result. We got this barrel here, and I got a friend of mine ordered one of these from Germany, where Christian Schwartz lives. Christian Schwartz, by the way, is a spiritual grandson of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer discipled his father, and so Schwartz learned kind of a lot of that secondhand from his spiritual grandfather, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But he was explaining this concept in churches about trying to discover which one of your quality characteristics is the least effective, and why that's important. Because see, in our Western thinking, we like to focus on our strengths. You know, we're a church that does music really, really well, so we're just going to focus on music. But if you think about each of those characteristics as being required, as being essential in your church in order for your church to grow, and if you think of your church in terms of this barrel, then it's a simple question. Which of these staves on this barrel determines how much water the barrel holds? Is it the longest stave or the shortest one? So in our Western thinking, we tend to want to capitalize on what we do well and do it even better. But there are some things that are essential that we just can't do without. For example, evangelism. We just can't do without evangelism in the church. We just can't say, our church is just not an evangelizing church, so we're going to take the stave and we're just going to rip it out altogether. Then you decrease your capacity even further. So what we want to do is find out which of these areas do we need to concentrate on the most. And we're going to pull that area up, or we're going to strengthen that area, and that increases our capacity until we come to a point where there's another stave that needs attention, and we're going to pull that one up. So the approach that Schwartz takes is that you evaluate your church in each of these 8 areas. And Jackie, could you pass this out? In case you didn't get them down, I copied that slide for you. Evaluate your church in each of those 8 areas, and then for a period of time, leverage your strengths to increase your weaknesses. So let's say your strengths are empowering leadership and your weakness is need-oriented evangelism. And so you look at how can we use our leadership strengths to improve in this area of evangelism. I don't have time to really go through these one by one, but I wanted to show you the growth force, the growth forces that Schwartz discovered that we see in nature. And if you decide you want to dig into this deeper, you want me to come visit with you, talk with you more about it, or do a workshop in your church, these are principles that we'll see in that kind of all-by-itself approach. Just as God is placed within the seed, everything that seed needs in order to grow, He's also placed within the church, everything the church needs to grow. But we just have to figure out what we're doing to block that growth and just simply release that growth potential. So these 6 principles: interdependence, multiplication, energy transformation, sustainability, symbiosis, and fruitfulness. We can dig into those later if you want to review this further with me. I do want to say something about multiplication, number 2 there, because I want to put in a plug for our next Lunch and Learn event. And it's happening on February 22nd, 2022. 2/22/22. And we're calling it 222 Tuesday. The 222 for 2 Timothy 2:2. And that's a passage on multiplication. 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul says, the things you have heard from me and trust to reliable men who will be faithful to also teach others. So there's 4 generations of leadership multiplication happening there, with the information going from Paul to Timothy to reliable men and to others. So we're going to talk about multiplication on 2/2/2 Tuesday, February 22nd. 2022, because that principle alone is one that I see is lacking in many churches. And basically, if your church is doing well in the area of multiplication, you're going to have more leaders than you know what to do with. Your biggest problem isn't going to be who are we going to get to lead this ministry. Your biggest problem is we have so many leaders and there's not enough places for them to serve. So therefore, we have to send some of them out to help revitalize this church over here. We have to send some of them out to plant a church over here. We have to send some of them out to the international mission field over here. And so what we want to do is focus on how can we get to where that's our main problem, that we have so many leaders we don't know where to send them. Yes, sir.
Got a question for you. How in the world do we compensate for the COVID virus, where we've got people that are scared to come to church? How do we get them back into the church?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of churches have taken different approaches. I tell you, the one that won't work is guilting them into coming back.
Making them feel guilty doesn't
Yeah.
get you back.
Yeah, don't try that. Another one I recommend that you don't do is don't pull the plug on your live stream. Because you say, well, okay, you're going to sit at home and watch this? Well, watch this now. Well, what? They're going to watch somebody else, or they're going to watch Andy Griffith?
And you can call them and talk to them and love them.
Yeah.
But
You'll get more.
how do you get them to cross over that little bit of fear that they've got to come back?
Yuli, were you gonna say something?
No.
Oh, okay. We're all listen. What's his name?
I'm staying out of this one.
Yeah, but I think I just keep loving them. Keep encouraging them, pray. Keep explaining to them why it's important for us to gather in person. My favorite one is create a little FOMO. You know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. Keep sharing with them what they're missing by not being there. Not in a way of guilting them, but I was sharing the story the other day. When I was a pastor, a lady asked me to come to her house and visit her husband. So I went to visit him. She gave us some coffee and pie, and we sat down there at the kitchen table. And she kind of backed out of the kitchen. She was kind of looking at me like sicken. He ain't going to church. Get on his case. I just sat there and got to know him a little bit more, drank coffee with him, ate some pie with him. And then he started giving me excuses for why he didn't go to church. I didn't bring it up. He started giving me, Pastor, I work 6 days a week. Church Sunday's my only day off. And I'm exhausted. I got to work in the yard. I got to have some me time. I said, okay, good. So then I asked him, I said, what do you do in the evenings when you get off work? And he said, well, I get off work, I come home, have dinner with my wife, and read to my kids, put them to bed and all that. And I said, well, do you have any hobbies? He says, yeah, I like to go bowling, I like to play golf. I said, why don't you do those things in the evening? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, don't you know some guys that they get off work and they go to the bar and they stay at the bar till 10 o'clock and then they come home, they go to sleep and they get up in the morning, they go to work and they do that again. Or don't you know some guys that every free moment they have, they're playing golf or handball or something or cards. They're never with their wife and kids. And he said, yeah, I know guys that do that. It's pretty sad. I said, why aren't you like that? He said, because I love my kids and I love my wife. I said, well, when you love Jesus as much as you love your wife, you'll find yourself in church. Do I want people coming because they've been manipulated or they've been guilted or because they can't stay away? That's what we need. They need to be at the point that they will overcome their fear. They just cannot stay away. They can't stay away. And that's what you want in your church. And if you can't get them with that, then,
Well, time is on our side.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that we may be in a situation where we're just having to love them enough to hang in there with them.
Right.
And let them get through whatever this is. And because we have hung in there with them, they're going to come back.
Our time is officially up, but I don't want your questions not to be answered. So if you need to leave, we understand. We want to honor your time. But if you have questions, I'll be glad to entertain those and see what we can do to answer one of those questions. Also, if you want copies of the 9 marks or the Lifeway research on healthy churches, I've made copies of those up here too. There are going to be some similarities and some differences. A couple of differences. 9 marks is a theological approach to church health. Lifeway is a research approach, much like natural church development. But the difference is In Lifeway's research, they used some research where they weren't just surveying Christian groups. They were surveying religious organizations. So you'll find Muslims and Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups in that research. So what I like about natural church development is it is biblically based, and I can go through the biblical basis for each one of these points, but it's also been demonstrated that it's actually happening in places around the world, regardless of location or culture. Okay, any other questions?
Is this book available in the associational library?
I think there's probably one of these back there. In fact, I got this from the association library, so you can take this one if you want.
Okay.
You can also buy them online. This one right here that I have, this is the original one. It was published, I think it was published in '96. So this just has the original results. If you get the new one, the results are the same. It's just more data. You know, after 20 years of doing the same research over and over and over again, they just kept coming up with more and more information. One of the things the new book says, though, and I say new because it's now 5 years old, one of the things that the newer book says is that when a church has looked at these characteristics objectively, when they've addressed their minimum factor and spent at least a year working on that minimum factor, that lowest stave, and when they come back and work on the next minimum factor, and then they come back and work on the next minimum factor, if they've been through that process 3 times because they have the data on those churches, on average, those churches have seen a 51% growth rate. Okay, so that means if you had 100 people when you started, 3 years later you have 210 people. Basically, is what that means. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming, and feel free to stay around, get to know each other a little bit better. There's a couple